production. He really just wanted to be able to kind of come in and out of it. So that's really the basis that he worked after that.
He got to the state where he was in his room. It didn't come out for periods of days at a time. So that was, he just was paranoid, schizophrenic, and very withdrawn. And it was the only place that he'd really come out of his shell at all was around a keyboard, around a piano. So, and that's where we happened to meet up with him, you know, when we do something like the Sunflower album.
All that entire period is just a vacuum in which we operated. You know, it's like, where do we go from here? You know, follow the yellow brick road. I don't know. It got very confusing. It allowed the rest of us to at least to pursue a songwriting and production to some extent, where, you know, at least we were able to, you know, to continue.
The music of those sort of late 60s, early 70s tended to be more of a democratic process. Al has a song, Mike has a song, Carl has an idea, whatever, Bruce has a song.
I don't know. I absolutely don't believe when you have a king, you know, or a queen or something, that you go to democracy so fast. Because there's a reason that Brian Wilson really did all those things, and I think my partners are tremendously talented, but in terms of the Beach Boys, Brian's the guy that was consistent, with Mike Love editing him a lot.
The only time we had any real success at all was on the 15 Big Ones album, which is when Brian resurfaced as the dominant producer of the album. Rock and roll music became a top 5 hit, which is pretty good.
Capitol Records released an album called Endless Summer. They started re-releasing these real successful repackages of our hits. So we just kind of stood aside, recording-wise, you know.
Period of decline again for Brian.
That was really the chaotic, the wild 70s, so, you know, we kind of, I don't even know what to say about that. I guess we got in trouble.
I just think that but the record company promoting us as the #1 surfing group in the USA, it sort of branded us as something that and placed us in a perspective, in a box, in a time which was, we were in an anachronism from the marketing sense. And so I don't think we ever recovered from that type of packaging and promotion and so on. And we had no record company that knew how to treat the new music.
And we're all ready.
like, oh, it's hard to believe. Not that he's gone, I've accepted that, but, I still go, God, it's really, I really don't want to, there's a part of me that doesn't want to accept it.
This guy was a prince. He was handsome, he had it all. And girls just loved this guy. I just think he got distracted from, his true talent, and that was music. I mean, he was really wonderful.
At the time, I didn't think his music fit in with what we were doing. But when I hear his work now, I really appreciate it.
I don't think it's really widely known, how talented he really was.
Everybody say yeah kind of thing, isn't it?
On the road, Carl Wilson is the band leader, and he, as we recreate what we all sang on, he has the same standard in terms of the discipline of the playing and the singing that Brian had making the recordings. It's really quite good to work with Carl, and having worked with Brian, it set a certain standard for me, and I was able to learn a lot about the construction of songs, as a songwriter.
I thought it maybe 4 bars.
Billy Hinchy is perfect for the piano playing. Playing Beach Boys piano charts for some players is very difficult. Billy just digs in and is really right for that. And he is probably the funniest man in the world.
Carl was married to my sister for a number of years, so it became a family thing with me. So whenever I was able, I'd go out on the road and just hang out. And then I sort of, then started playing tambourine every now and again on tour, and then moved on to the electric piano. And eventually they asked me to be a part of the band. Well, I was still in high school, and I really could, my folks wanted me to finish my education. I still had my own band. So I said, well, tell you what, I'm going to finish college. Then I'd love to be a part of the band. So that's exactly what happened.
Mike Kowalski's a wonderful drummer, great sense of time.
Everything's pretty much the same. Music, the feel, the audience is a little bit older, but I find it, more inviting, I think, especially when you see somebody who's the age of 6 and 7 singing the lyrics to, fun, 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 as well as seeing somebody 50 and 55 doing the same thing.
Fun, fun, fun. 1, 2, 3.
Ed Carter is, I think he's the best musician in the band of all of us. He's just one of those guys who just, he's just right there doing an incredible job.
Yeah, my perception of what the Beach Boys do on stage, it's not so much a concert to be analyzed and listened to, although there's a pleasure in that. But I think the main pleasure is there's an interactive quality. It's an invitation, basically, for people to get up and feel good and optimistic and to let go and sing. These are songs that have been recognized and memorized by people for 20 years or so, and it's just an invitation to get up and have a real good time. And that's when we have the best time, when we see the audience reacting like that and being, kind of one with us. It's a big stage.
William Baker, of course, is from England, and he sings the high parts a good part of the time. Mike Maros is another wonderful player. Of course, Matthew Jardine is Alan's son, and he's improving on percussion all the time.
I started playing full-time for the Beach Boys in 1988. I just got out of college. I had about $13 in my bank account. I needed a job, so they put me on management. I did management for a while John Stamos was out. John Stamos is a famous TV star, and he had a writer's strike, so he was playing percussion. When the writer's strike ended, I got the slot, jumped in there, and started playing, and it's been like that ever since.
Still cruising after all of these years. Hey girl, let's go for a spin. Hop in the hot rod and do it again. You got a greenhouse effect on me. I know a secret spot, paradise by the sea. We'll find a place to park that's kind of cool.
Brian, we just haven't been able to, Mike hasn't been able to talk to him, his mother hasn't been able to, Carl hasn't, his daughters haven't, we haven't, so he's kind of been isolated from us.
Brian's inability to be a Beach Boy right now is the hardest thing to take, because it leaves this enormous vacuum, as I said earlier, where you don't have all of the component parts that made it what it is.
There's a place called Kokomo. That's where you wanna go to get away from it all.
I have pretty good commercial instincts. For instance, Kokomo, we sold over 1 million singles, which you don't do these days in the U.S. And so it does establish that the Beach Boys, and Brian Wilson's voice was not on it. He was nowhere in the studio, nowhere to be found. This is not because we didn't want him there, but because he was not allowed to come to the studio and record with us.
Concept of the 30th year maybe is that we could all work together and bring the music back together and maybe even tour together for that year. I think that might be important. So yeah, then it would have been, all of us would be very happy.
I've agreed not to say anything about it till a certain time. But I think it's actually possible that we could get into the studio with Brian this year.
And I'm hoping that when we have the next Beach Boy album, that we grab all those, hundreds of songs he must have been writing all these years and kind of shift or sift through them, and we find some nice art treasures for the 90s from Brian.
To a Vietnam veteran on a flight a few months back who told me, this is a guy who worked for one of the large telephone companies in the United States, who was an executive, very educated guy with a couple of PhDs, one in art and some other things, and yet he was a very down-to-earth type of guy. He was, dressed in casual clothes and very his own man type of thing. But he literally said to me, I want to thank you. You guys actually saved my life in Vietnam. And that really hit me because, you know, you don't go around thinking you saved somebody's life, you know. But I mean, for him, he says, your music enabled us to get up every morning and do what we had to do. And so that really affected me emotionally. And to know that we had actually been able to affect people in that way, it was enlightening for me.
You know, I think we all feel really fortunate. I mean, we are.
I want to thank you for coming to see the Beach Boys tonight in my story. Well, she got her daddy's car and she cruised through the Hemingway Canal. She forgot about the library and she took her man down. And with the radio flies can go through the valley she can't die.
Beach Boys.
Over 20 years after the Beach Boys created this surf classic,
The distinct honor of introducing a man.
You love to watch
Okay, hi. I'm Art Fine. This is Little Art's Poker Party, coming to you from Hollywood on a beautiful day in August, 1988. Special show devoted to Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, the Smile album. Can you see that over there? I got a panel of experts to tell me about it. Let me introduce my first expert. I got Paul Williams. Paul, it's a group to see you. Weren't you in the Temptations?
Oh, yeah, I was, but
You did a
I
deep voice?
killed myself.
There was a Paul Williams,
Yes.
besides the little guy that we know about. That's
The guy in the Temptations shot himself in a car long time ago.
Is that right?
There's been a few others. There's a movie director.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
You're not the songwriter, then, who writes all those great songs like for the Muppets?
He does my TV usually, but this is an exception. Especially for Art, I agreed to come on.
Okay.
In this incarnation?
Yeah.
This is one of Paul's books, the latest. It talks about, what does it talk about?
Rediscovering rock and roll.
So, it's for people like myself who have been out of it chronically for 20 years?
Yeah, it's for those of us who were tremendously into it at one point or another, and are wondering if there's still something going on, and if there is something going on, am I too old to relate to it or not, and what would happen, if I jump back in with both feet?
Because you're a longtime rock chronicler. I mean, you've been from the beginning, really, right? What was your slot with Crawdaddy?
Well, certainly it's not the beginning of rock and roll, but Crawdaddy, which I started when I was a teenager and a college student, was the first American rock and roll magazine. And that was like January of '66. So I had a great ride. I mean, I got to be part of the scene at a really exciting time, basically '66 through '68, '69, that period.
And that's about how long you wrote it?
That's how long I was really actively involved in writing about rock and roll. There were, other periods since then when I've done some of it, but primarily my book, Outlaw Blues, and
Outlaw Blues.
My time with Crawdaddy as the editor and so forth runs '66 to '68.
Okay, well, we're going to get into the stuff you did in 1966 with Brian Wilson and the great missing album, Smile, in just a minute. Let's introduce David Leaf. David.
Hello, Warren.
Hey, it's a groove to see you. Did you wear that shirt so you'd stand out, like everybody would notice you?
Well, it's California, it's blue.
White Leaf.
The ocean.
Well, it's a good way to one-up the guys on the other side because you really got a vivacious look.
Oh, that's good.
I think you're really outstanding today. And this is David's book about the Beach Boys. This is the reissue or second pressing.
Second edition, revised, of The Beach Boys and the California Myth, which came out in 1978, and this edition came out in 1985.
So, okay, we'll talk about that in a second. So, what else? I mean, and you write and you...
Primarily, I work in television. Right now, there's a writer's strike going on, so for the last 6 months, I've been working over at Warner Brothers Records, helping coordinate activities surrounding Brian Wilson's album, which everybody watching the show should have bought by now.
Right, absolutely. Well, welcome to the show, David. You've been standing to the sides before watching, but you've never been on. Dominic's been on once. Dominic Priori.
Once and a half.
Once and a half? Oh, that's right. You were on one show where we talked about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys for a half hour, and you were on another show talking to Brian Wilson for about a minute.
That's right.
Well, let's see, Dominic claimed to fame, among others, I mean, one of many, Surfing Colors Productions, of course, is what you know him for mostly.
Yes.
But he also puts out this little tome about, so this one's about Smile, particularly. But basically, when he's put out stuff in the past, it's been about Brian Wilson and
surf music.
And surf music.
Bill
and
Spector.
Bill Spector, things of that ilk. Now, this supposedly is, how many pages is this?
I think 263.
263 pages, many of which are reprints of articles.
That's right. I can't take myself to blame. I can blame Paul and David, and they added to the book, too.
Oh, there's articles in there by these guys?
That's right.
All taken without permission and, with no... Right.
no substance.
No royalties.
No money.
No money. But these guys are great.
If we can, now follow this finger. If you could look at this album cover for a second, it's not an album cover you see in the stores anywhere because there's no such album. Maybe you could tell me a little about this is the Beach Boy album Smile, which was to come out after Pet Sounds.
Right. What was your line on Pet Sounds that David was talking about earlier, by the way?
Oh, because I'm a latecomer to the Brian camp. I'm a latecomer to digging the Brian Wilson sound, so that I heard my first album that I really listened to in depth was the new Brian Wilson album. Then you gave me Pet Sounds to listen to, and I said, that's nice, but it's just kind of the roots of the new Brian album. That's the way I look at it. You know, that it's a nice warm-up, but this is the album.
That's great. Wow, that's brilliant to say.
No, it's stupid, actually.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. You know,
stupidly brilliant. You can be both at the same time.
Well, what Smile was the follow-up to Pet Sounds, which, if it, as we all know, if it would have came out in 1966 or early 67, would have blown some minds. Good Vibrations was the first single from it, which obviously did blow a lot of minds. And following that up would have been Heroes and Villains and the Smile album, which was just an amazing piece. Pre-Sgt. Pepper, post-Revolver, a very crucial time in rock and roll history, I'd say.
Now, I, as a layman, sort of watching the Beach Boys, as, well, I like, that's Good Vibration, that's a good song.
Yeah.
I remember I went out, I'll say, I already owned All Summer Long, that album.
Good album.
And then I didn't buy anything else. And then when Good Vibrations came out, I did buy Smiley Smile, and I said, I don't know. It's got these vegetable songs and stuff. This is all very kind of fun, but, you know, it didn't really matter much to me. Now, if I'd been smart, I would have bought this album if it was available, right?
Well, it wasn't up to your being smart or not. It just wasn't available because of problems that happened at the time. But the music that was recorded for it exists. Most of it is you know, there's hours of it. How many hours of it, David?
Well, David,
countless hours.
You've heard...
In the last 6 months, Capitol Records has launched an exercise through the archives trying to determine exactly what exists in terms of Smile. And Mark Lynette, who was the engineer on Brian's solo album, and Andy Paley, who worked closely with Brian on this album, collaborated on several of the songs, and worked, co-produced part of the album with Brian. And I have had a chance to go through the archives and listen to the material, and there are indeed hours and hours of fascinating music, most of which is unfinished in one form or another, ranging from basic piano demo all the way to an almost finished track that hasn't quite been pieced together. And hopefully, at some time in the not-too-distant future, all of this will coalesce into a multi-CD project that will come out under the title The Smile Era or The Smile Sessions.
Sessions, yeah. Smile Sessions.
Something like that.
That would be good.
Smile Sessions sounds great.
Because what we have, what we can listen to is, as an artist, Brian Wilson, at the peak of his powers, traveling off into a new dimension, taking pop music into a revolutionary era. And that's really where Paul comes in, because Paul was the first person to chronicle this activity that was going on in Los Angeles at a time when Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys were considered incredibly unhip. This was pre-Good Vibrations and post all the surfing and car hits, and people kind of looked down at the Beach Boys. Not that they were right or wrong,
trivial pop music stuff.
But it wasn't relevant in light of Bob Dylan and all of that.
Well, Paul, I mean, what you said was that you formed Crawdaddy in 1966, even as a very small sheet. But I guess that made you totally a pioneering guy, because the Rolling Stone impact wasn't until 2 years later. So for anybody, just the idea of chronicling the movement of rock music was unique. So how did that have an impact on you? You came down here from the north, from
No, I was living at the time, when I was doing Crawdaddy, I was first in Boston and then in New York City. And actually, my first visit to California in my life was in December of 1966, when I met Brian Wilson and hung out at his house and at their recording sessions for several days.
At whose urging was this? Were you writing to him and saying, gee, I'd really like to see your sessions? Or were they saying, here's a cool guy?
I had already established myself as a Beach Boys fan. I mean, as David says, I've been writing in the magazine about how great Pet Sounds and the other things that they've been putting out were. And I don't know, it was a guy named Michael Vossi brought me up to Brian's house, and he was one of the people involved in the scene at the time, and I don't even remember how that happened. It was just something I wanted to do, and, you know.
The key player in '66 was Derek Taylor. And
yeah, I'm sure it was through Derek, actually.
Now, he was the Beatles publicist, I know.
Right.
Has been over the years, yeah.
Was he both bands' publicist?
Yes. Derek had his own PR. He left the Beatles for a while and came to Los Angeles and started his own public relations agency, which is surely in the history of public relations agencies, this is, you know, one of the greatest or most historic that ever happened.